Yeah? Right?
Yes.
Deal?
Boing.
Welcome to the Acquia podcast, Drupal technology, community, and business.
Welcome to the Acquia podcast, Drupal technology, community, and business.
There's a module for that?
Of course there is.
Ronald, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm doing fine. How are you?
You are the CTO of BlueSpark Labs, is that right?
Indeed, yes.
Now, BlueSpark Labs is another one of those highly distributed companies. Tell us where you are this fine morning.
So I live in Italy, and I'm actually in the southernmost tip of Sicily, so all the way down. And BlueSpark has people from pretty much everywhere in the world except the Asian and Australian continents.
Okay, it gives you room to expand, though, right?
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about your day job and what it is that BlueSpark does.
So BlueSpark is a creative digital agency. We like to call ourselves that. What that really means is we build websites mostly, exclusively with Drupal, although that these days means lots of different things, and all sorts of other technologies come into play. And perhaps something that is slightly different from most creative digital agencies, at least in the Drupal world, we have two very specific products that we're spending a lot of time working on. And that's Roomify, which is a solution for hotel bookings, and something a completely different field, which is Italy Magazine, an online digital media brand with its kind of editorial team and sales team and all of that.
You said Italy Magazine?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's also, is that for tourists, people coming to Italy, or is that for Italians?
That is for lovers of Italy, Italophiles. So typically not Italians, mostly Americans, English-speaking people that just love the idea of either living in Italy or visiting very often or just doing Italian things where they live.
Wow, okay, that sounds great. It sounds like something I should check out. So that is a really interesting combination for a digital agency. It puts you with at least half a foot in the publishing world as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Rumah Phi is a project that you started several years ago and used to be called Drupal Rooms, right?
Yes, and it's actually still, so the open source version of it is still called Drupal Rooms, and the module is kind of doing its thing on Drupal.org and growing, and features are being added, and versions are being changed and improved, and bugs are being fixed. Roomify is what we're calling the commercial aspect of these things, and Roomify is really going to launch next week with its first product. It's actually very exciting.
Wow. So because the audience might be watching this in the future, it's going to be launching mid-September 2014. And what's it going to be doing?
So what we've done is started creating a series of specific solutions using Drupal and the Rooms module for vacation rentals, for small hotels, and for B&Bs. So it's kind of taking the booking engine, which gives you the core functionality you need for your site, building around it everything else you need to run your site, and building in all the best practices that come from the Drupal world and come from what a vacation rental or small B&B need, and then adding a nice set of themes for you so you can play around with it and managing it on your own. And the first thing we're doing is very simple, just packaging all that up and saying it's available to you for a small fee.
So it's kind of a site building and promotion kit for for hotels and small rental properties?
Exactly. Exactly.
Great, that sounds sweet. So I'm going to link to all of that in the show notes here. And maybe once a couple of those things are up and running, you could come back and do a cool demo. That would be fun.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, so you and I met, I think, in San Francisco at DrupalCon, and that must have been 2010, is that right? Time really flies when you're doing this stuff.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, so DrupalCon San Francisco. But when did you actually get started in Drupal? What's your first Drupal memory?
My first Drupal memory. So the reason I started was I was working exclusively on Italy Magazine, which we just mentioned, and it was a collection of WordPress blogs, Joomla sites, and some other PHP's crazy scripts that each one did its own thing. Oh, and there was like a vBulletin forum in it there as well.
Oh, you mean
and it was
fun?
Oh yeah, it was exciting. Just the fact that it was working every day was amazing. So we needed to find a solution, right? That was completely unsustainable. And I started researching CMSs. And now I come from a computer science background, but nothing to do with website development. It was kind of a complete career shift for me. So I'm looking into all these various things, and I had settled between Ruby on Rails, because at the time it was exciting and all the cool kids were doing Ruby on Rails, and this thing called Drupal, which just looked completely not exciting when compared to Ruby on Rails. It was sort of like 2005 or something, or 2006 maybe. But Drupal had something that I found very exciting. It talked about this abstract concept of nodes and vocabularies and terms. And my background before Drupal was academia, and I was doing semantic web and AI. I was saying, wow, these people are like ahead of the curve here. They're thinking abstractly like you should be thinking when you're thinking of CMSs. So Drupal won the day because of things that at the time everyone else was complaining about. It's like, what the hell are vocabularies, and why do you have this weird word taxonomy in there? And that was what convinced me.
Oh, wait a minute. The thing that was upsetting people because it was such a funny time as well in the history of the project, because there was a big fight about specifically about that word, whether it should be taxonomies or categories, right?
Yes.
And then categories just doesn't accurately describe what taxonomies are. But for one release, they got called categories, and now they're called taxonomies again, and they shall be till the end of time.
They should be.
It was also very clear to me I started in Drupal around the same time. It was very clear to me that that was already a very powerful concept, and then with the with the addition of CCK at the time,
Exactly.
which let us build our own content types, we had an incredible data modeling, right? So information architecture tool on our hands already, and people, hadn't seen quite yet where that was going to go. Obviously, it's a sort of thing that people take for granted in Drupal and elsewhere now, but it was a big deal at the time. It was funny. There were a lot of fights going on about that. I like that it's actually what convinced you to come into the project.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was 2005, 2006. So we're talking about, you're at the tail end of Drupal 4, beginning of Drupal 5, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
What made you stick with Drupal? Why are you still doing Drupal today?
So I started, I should say, we started using it to rebuild Italy Magazine, and we relaunched Italy Magazine in Drupal 5. And that was very exciting, and everything was working much better. Although, there were still issues. And then I realized, okay, we've actually spent quite some time in this Drupal thing, And I was at the time, I was still treating it like it's just a tool, nothing more. But we've spent all this time in it. We should actually try and figure out how does this work, and is there going to be a Drupal 6? When is there going to be Drupal 6? How are we going to deal with that? So I started looking into the community aspect of things, and figuring out who was who and how they were interacting. Then I saw, oh, they have events. That's interesting. Maybe I should go to an event. And I remember very clearly there was the Barcelona event. That was maybe already 2008, maybe. And I couldn't go to that, and I was gutted. But then there was Paris, and I went to that, and I was blown over. And it's kind of a cliche thing to say within the Drupal world, the community, but it was really interesting to see all this activity going on, and sprints, and people getting excited about the next versions and what's going to happen, and so on. So that's what, unfortunately, I'm the complete cliche. Came for the software, stayed for the community. It's
Well, fair enough. So DrupalCon Paris, that was indeed 2009. So we missed each other at that one, but luckily we met waiting for a bus in San Francisco, I remember. So
very good memory, yeah.
So besides the community, perhaps, what is your favorite thing about Drupal?
That's it. I think my favorite thing about Drupal is the willingness to change and the willingness to break things. So from Drupal 6 to Drupal 7, it wasn't such a huge change, but it was a big change once you compare things. And from 7 to 8, it's going to be even bigger. And I realized that change takes time, and change is painful, and you may lose some people along the way, and you gain others, and so on. But just this willingness to say, we actually need to keep up with the rest of the world, and also aim just a bit ahead of that curve is very important. So, for example, Drupal 7 was, again, kind of linking it back to my background before, the whole semantic web, RDFA, metadata, the way you can annotate pages, that again is something that was really exciting, that kept me interested in the project in an intellectual way, as opposed to just, this is a tool that's going to get our job done for the day-to-day work.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting. So intellectual stimulation as a factor is that makes a lot of sense, though. It's a community of smart people. We're a community of smart people doing exciting, interesting things. Although I'm noticing a pattern with you. Two of the things that upset people are the things that you seem to like the best. Taxonomies. Back in its day, it was controversial, but this idea that we sacrifice backwards compatibility to stay relevant, to stay exciting, to stay in the game causes an awful lot of people to stay away from the project. So, all right, so you're a bit of a contrarian.
You said it.
Talk about, now in the context especially, I think, of being a Drupal business person, talk about the benefits that you get working with open source. So maybe the benefits that you get at your company, but also how do your clients benefit that you're a service provider around an open source software package?
So I think there's a few interesting things around that. So there's the maybe more obvious kind of benefits that clients get in terms of the quality of the finished product that would just be it's just much better than anything they would get within a different context, because there's just such a much wider community of people working on it. The range of solutions and the flexibility with which you can play around with them. those are kind of the obvious things that get across to clients immediately. I think in terms of the company, it's very interesting you're essentially building a company around a community. And most people that are part of the company were first part of the Drupal community. So it's kind of people that you've seen around, you've talked to. And it's only recently, as Drupal has been growing and growing, that you're actually bringing in complete new people because there's just not enough people within the community to deal with it. But that kind of gives you a set of principles in a way as a company, a culture that is wider than just the company, and that I think is actually useful for the company itself. Now, the other side of it is, and this is where kind of Rooms comes in and how we see expanding Drupal in various different areas, is how Drupal can actually give you a starting point to go into a market that is not used at all to open source. And the travel market is exactly that. With Rooms has been a slow process, but it's been necessarily that way because we had to educate ourselves about what the travel market is, and it's actually one of the biggest markets in terms of their use of technology. But this is completely dominated by closed proprietary software, and it's very exciting to be able to start with something like Drupal that already takes you so far ahead, and you just add your little thing on top of that, and suddenly you open up a market. And in a way, the model is very much, I guess, commerce, which is obviously much more generic, much more bigger market, but that's exactly it. You add that extra bit of functionality, and suddenly you have commerce plus something else, and that's far more exciting than just building a cart tool.
Okay, sure. Wow. So I can think of your starting into the travel industry in the same way that I can think about Drupal commerce. We can take our technology to a place that is not using it and not used to it, leverage all of the advantages that we already understand that we have with open source, if we can explain them to these people. And clearly, tourism is such a huge thing nowadays, just like e-commerce is a huge thing. That makes a fantastic amount of sense. Where can I buy one? Let's go back to one point in the things that you just said, and then we'll spring ahead to my last couple of questions, and then actually I do want to get to your session, which is why you're here today. When you're talking with your customers, or potential clients who maybe don't know you, who maybe don't know Drupal yet, you can't really just walk in the room and say, hey, we do this open source thing, so that means we're just going to deliver something better, and it's going to be way more awesome. And it's the right thing to do because we're software hippies and we know better than you. So how do you actually take them through that discussion? How do you get them quickly on board with the advantages that open source gives them in the end?
We've tried a number of different things, but at the end of the day, the most effective way to show them why this is going to be actually useful for them, especially in a scenario where they're really not interested in the whole open source philosophy of things. That's just not even part of the conversation. So in those cases, the most effective thing to show them is a demo. It's just so simple. And you're actually telling them, look, this is your starting point. And invariably, that starting point is already much more exciting and much better than what they had in place. So the key is understanding what are their pain points, where are they coming from? And that's especially interesting if they're coming from something that's already kind of nice. So let's say, they have like, let's say a nice WordPress installation, right? So the shiny factor is not going to be there. They already have something that's maybe even looks nicer. So you need to understand what are their pain points with that WordPress installation and so on, and then show them how that goes away with Drupal already at the demo stage, which then means that you can actually work on the rest of the relationship. Because something that we try very hard to do is build long-term relationships with clients. So we're perfectly happy to say, all these things that you thought were really complicated, those are actually not necessarily the issue. What else do you want to do? Just a small example with hotels. They're typically forced into some booking engine that's going to take the client off their site, and they're going to have to work within those very strict parameters. So what you can actually say is, look, this is all within your site. This is all you. You're now free. And how much did this cost? Practically nothing. So then once they are actually on board with that, you can say, okay, so the reason this is also great is because there's a whole open source community that works on it. So when we come and say, can we please spend some extra time to send that patch back to the community, you need to say yes, because that's how things work.
Right.
And then they're much more receptive to that part
Right.
of the deal.
Right, because the thing that you got has millions of hours of coding already built into it that you got for free, so let's give a couple back.
Yeah, and there's obvious benefits to them. So but they need to get the immediate advantage first, and then the rest will come on board.
So have you been following the Drupal 8 release cycle much?
Not as much as I would like, but quite a bit, I think.
What are you most excited about in Drupal 8?
Ooh, headless decoupled Drupal. I was actually trying to convince a couple of different clients 2 years ago at this point about how we should be building decoupled CMSs, so using Drupal. So I think, again, it kind of proves that the willingness to break things takes Drupal in the right way. And right now, our team is doing these things like I think a lot of Drupal agencies are. You're using Angular and you're just feeding it JSON or whatever in the backend, and that's all.
For those who aren't familiar with the term, you're talking about using Drupal as a content management or app or what have you backend, but decoupling the theming layer and using it to power an iOS app or an Angular front end, Angular JS front end, or my refrigerator or whatever it is.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So we have talked long enough about this stuff, and it's not actually why I invited you here today at all. This is Jam's virtual Drupal camp, where if I hear about a session out in the community, if somebody's talking at DrupalCon, what have you, and it sounds interesting to me, I invite people like Ronald on to present that session with me online. For me, it's practically just a private audience so that I can just watch it without being disturbed. But and then have it as a community resource. Make sure that the information gets out. Make sure that it's easy to find. So that's what we're going to be doing here in a minute. If you are watching or listening to the Acquia podcast right now, if you've gotten it through TuneIn Radio or SoundCloud or iTunes, we're going to stop the podcast in just a minute, and you need to go to the page for this episode on acquia.com. You'll be able to find it under /podcast, and you'll also be able to find it under /jams-Drupal-camp, Jams Drupal Camp, and there is a page that includes this interview video, Ronald's full session, his slides, session description, links to all the stuff we're talking about, and I believe it is a valuable resource for you if you're interested in all this stuff. So, Ronald, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with you today. It's great to talk to you. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon somewhere for real. It's been a little bit longer than usual. So, thank you for this. And podcast is cutting out now.